Hey everyone, my name is Jose, and this is my in-depth review of the Solana Mobile Saga. This will be a very informative review, so if you're looking for anything specific, there are timestamps below and across the timeline. Unboxing the Saga was pretty fine. You get the phone, a SIM ejector tool, paper to store your seed phrase, and a very good charging cable that is at least 5 feet long. There's no charger in the box, which explains the slim packaging, but I'm very satisfied with it overall. The charging cable stands out for a few reasons. First is that it's over 5 feet long and it's braided, which is quite generous for a phone provider to provide by default. It's also a Type-C to Type-C cable, which is starting to become the norm. There's this data blocker switch that stops data flow between your device and another device. This is to prevent juice jacking attacks, which is when you plug your device into a public outlet, but unknowingly, the outlet is malicious and tries to upload malware to your device. The light is on when data can be transferred and off when it blocks that. I can appreciate that this switch is here because it can be useful, but it does have major drawbacks. The problem is that the data switch blocker somehow influenced the charging cable to only have a rated speed of data transfer of USB 2.0 instead of a more modern USB 3.1 speed. It's also interesting that they put the switch on there because most public outlets are still using USB-A, but this charging cable is double Type-C, so that's pretty weird. And the cable can deliver up to 60 watts of power, which is pretty good. This data blocker feature on the cable is fine, but you could always just buy a dedicated USB data blocker or carry a portable bank. Now onto the OS, which kind of surprised me. It's literally stock Android. These are all the apps you get out of the box. There's literally no bloatware at all, which is really cool. So everything about this phone is, again, literally stock Android 13. From the settings to the notification shade and everything else. I think this was a good move because stock Android provides a clean experience out of the box, and I feel like that's what most people who buy this phone just want. The very basic and nothing more that would interfere with your user experience. There's also the D-App Store, which is not bloatware, but rather a feature that I will talk about later on. The display is a 6.67-inch 1080p 120Hz OLED display that is pretty good but remains average in this range. It has a flat display and the bezels around it are kind of thick for a $1,000 phone, but are manageable. This phone probably goes up to 700 nits. I don't have an exact specification, but that's pretty weak for a phone in this range. And by the way, I'm just eyeing it, so I'm not too sure. But if I am right, then it should have been at least 1,000 nits. It also doesn't have LPTO technology, so it won't scale down its refresh rate, which is kind of disappointing, and there's no specified Gorilla Glass iteration. A big problem about the display is its adaptive brightness. Indoors, it's always too low, like way too low, that you can't really see the content on your phone, and it needs to be tweaked via a software update. Outdoors, the brightness is pretty fine, but it looks better in person than it does on camera. Also, the phone can't really play back HDR content, even though it should support it, so they need to fix that if it doesn't support it, because it looks like it kind of doesn't. There's only one variant of the phone, which is this black color design. It's supposed to match Solana's colors, which explains the faded black and the accented buttons. However, they should have made the logo on the back colored based on this logic. It has a ceramic back with a stainless steel frame and titanium on the buttons and on the camera bump. And it feels like a good build, but it's quite heavy. It's 247 grams, which is 7 more grams than the iPhone 14 Pro Max. You will definitely feel this heft in the hand, but overall, the design, while very basic, has good materials, and I like the squared off edges, and the ceramic back is somewhat okay with fingerprint interactions. The speakers on this phone is just very lacking and is probably the worst thing about this phone. It just lacks detail, it has very bad instrument imaging, and it has very noticeable sibilance. Let me play you a quick sample for you to hear.
Every day, I want your touch, and every way, I can't get it out. Anything, just to feel the rush. This just ain't enough. Will you be my ride or die? Would you really serve me? Will you be my ride or die? Will you be my ride or die?
And the Poco X3 Pro is a 2021 phone that retailed for $250. However, I do believe in the speaker burn-in theory, which is when after 200 hours of total playback on any speaker, the speaker would just become better, and I have experienced that with my Poco X3 Pro, so maybe it could be the same for the Solana Mobile Saga, but other than that, I'm not too sure. And lastly, this phone doesn't have a headphone jack. The haptics on the phone feel pretty okay, doesn't really feel too great or too bad. And the fingerprint scanner is a capacitive touch one on the back, which I like more than in-display ones, but it's not a programmable button, which is sad because rear fingerprint scanners usually have some sort of software function. In this case, it would have been better to make the power button the fingerprint scanner, just like how my Poco X3 Pro has this, which I prefer more than anything else. So charging and battery usage on this phone is actually kind of weird. So it's unspecified at the moment on how fast this phone can charge, like 50 watts, 60 watts. We don't really know right now, but it does support wireless charging, but at an unknown rated speed as well. And battery life on this phone is just really strange. So it has a 4110 milliampere hour battery, which is kind of okay. I would have wanted it to be higher, but it will do for now. But what's really weird is that how fast it loses its battery. So overnight on idle, it will lose about 10% of battery, which is really way too much. It's way too much. And it desperately needs some battery optimizations via a software update to address the battery drain. Performance on this phone is pretty good because it uses the Snapdragon 8 Plus Gen 1. However, that was last year's chip, and the current chip is the 8 Gen 2. That doesn't mean that this phone is not capable or is obsolete, but for $1,000, it would have been really nice to use the current iteration of the chip. COD Mobile on max settings was really good. I couldn't monitor the FPS on this phone, but it seemed very consistent with no frame drops, and the ultra frame rate looks like it's 90 FPS, and same thing, really good. Honkai Impact the Third with max settings and 90 FPS was good, and I did not see any slowdowns when multiple enemies are on screen. At first, I did see these slowdowns, but later on, it stabilized itself, so that might be related to optimizations, but it's very good overall. Genshin Impact felt like it was hovering around 50 FPS because it had some frame drops, but I couldn't exactly measure it, so I can't say for sure. But gaming on this phone feels pretty natural and should meet your expectations coming from this chip. And thermals on this phone felt pretty good even when playing something like Genshin. I'm glad it didn't feel excessively hot, and I'm glad the thermals were well managed. There's also a performance mode, but since I don't have an FPS meter on this phone, I can't say for sure whether it helped out or not on Genshin. For camera samples, I'm actually going to be doing something a little different. So I'm only going to provide you a few samples because I have a more detailed camera review coming out. So here are the basics. The main camera is a 50 megapixel sensor, and daytime photos are actually quite fine. White balance is pretty good, there's good saturation, and color rendition is also nice. Dynamic range kind of surprised me because I expected it to be bad, but it seems fine with some clipping highlights here, and bokeh segmentation is pretty fine and even works with non-human subjects, but it will struggle in this area. My only big problems is low light photos. Even when night mode is on, these photos are just really lacking. And there's no 50 megapixel mode, which I find to be absurd. So it only bends down to 12.5 megapixels for a reason I highly disagree with. The ultra wide camera is fairly consistent with the main camera, and that definitely surprised me. So the same goes for here, and night photos are again very disappointing and it should be greatly improved. Selfie camera is also consistent with the main camera, and the bokeh segmentation is also good, but it can struggle like in the shot. Video on all the cameras is pretty good in the daytime, and this also surprised me a little, mostly because all the cameras are again somewhat consistent in their style, but it is unacceptably grainy in darker environments. In fact, more grainy than the average phone. But the best way to sum up everything is that it's of course not the strength of the phone, but what you get here is reminiscent of a about $400 phone to some capacity. It's fine, but not special and underperforms in some areas. Now it's time for the Web3 aspect of this phone, which is why you would buy this phone more than anything else. I have a lot to say about it, so let's start with the basics, which are three things. First is the Solana Mobile Stack, which is an SDK for apps to connect to the Solana blockchain and use their protocols to interact with the software of the device, especially to the phone's seed vault, which is number 2. The seed vault is your dedicated cold storage wallet with a 24-phrase seed. It stores your private keys and it never leaves the vault when connecting to wallets. All you have to do is connect your seed vault to a wallet interface, such as Phantom Wallet, to manage Web3 assets. The third part is the Solana dApp Store, which only has a handful of apps and is supposed to be the main selling point of the phone and is the gateway to Web3 on mobile. The Saga Genesis token gets you free crypto and other utility perks like minting NFTs on these apps. This token is a pretty nice welcome to discovering the dApp Store by getting you started with free stuff. Now, here are some things I want you to know about those specific elements. Let's just start with what this is. It's a Web3 phone and has those three elements working together to provide you a Web3 experience, but it has several flaws. The Solana Mobile Stack is in its early stages right now and doesn't really have a lot to offer. However, that's not what we should really focus on. The SMS SDK is open source and is meant to do a variety of things, and one of them is make apps compatible to sign transactions on the Solana blockchain. And if I have this correctly, technically, you don't need this phone at all to interact with Web3. According to this Discord moderator for Solana Mobile, the Solana dApp Store is coming to other phones, and that's because the open source framework can be deployed to any other phone. What is relatively unique about this phone is its seed vault, which is its cold storage, and it even has an SDK for Solana apps to interact with the seed vault. That's meant to be secured by the secure element processor on the A+ Gen 1, but that also means that any other phone that has a security chip, which should be all modern phones, has the capability of supporting a cold wallet right into the phone. And from what I can understand by listening to this Twitter Spaces chat with the Solana CEO, the seed vault is behind the Android OS layer, so it's a top-level process, but at the same time, it shouldn't be hard for other manufacturers to just make a cold wallet right into their phones. Also, while this seed vault enables you to manage Web3 assets on device, kind of similar to a Trezor wallet with a screen, it only supports Solana, Ethereum, and Polygon-based assets. And that was by chance because out of all the 3 wallets that are compatible with the seed vault, Phantom Wallet puts in that support for Ethereum and MATIC, and that's a real bummer. I won't cover any specific dApps in the store, but this phone doesn't even have AR Core, which is a framework that makes augmented reality apps behave more nicely. So that means that since you don't have AR Core, your AR NFTs aren't going to be extra stable. As you can tell, this phone has a lot of problems, not because it's a Web3 phone with pending features, but because the features it has are not entirely special. Just give us a few more years and expect someone like Samsung or other manufacturers to add a seed vault to their devices because they already have the hardware to support it because of the SoCs they use. They just need to program it. Not only that, but this phone is strictly Solana right now. It's in the name, Solana Mobile, and out of all the 3 wallets you can use, most of them are just Solana focused, with the only outlier being Phantom Wallet. And while the Solana Mobile Stack is pretty unique right now, the dApp Store is coming to other phones, so you don't even need this phone to use those apps. And I keep asking myself, what makes this phone future-proofed for Web3, or at the very least, has something that cannot be replicated via a software update to my other phones? And the answer is just the seed vault. Everything is software based, and all it takes is for this phone to download the App Store, whether Solana or another one, for it to be Web3 capable. The best way to describe this device is Web3 capable and not Web3 future proof. This phone is a big disappointment in many ways, especially its price tag. I'd say that this phone is a bigger flop than the HTC Desire 22 Pro, which was a metaverse focused phone but did nothing special to provide that experience. This shouldn't have tried to be so high end with its specs because it's trying to play the numbers game when it doesn't really have a reason to do that. It should have been around $500 with mid-range specs, which is seriously more than enough in 2023, especially if you want Web3 to be accessible to others. I hope you get my point because this video is already long as it is, and I kind of don't want to keep explaining myself. And even so, there's still a lot of things I did not cover in this video because, again, there's just a lot to talk about. One final thing. I'm trying to figure out the specifications of certain aspects of the hardware, such as if it has UFS 3.1 storage or stuff like that, because those sort of specifications right now are unknown, and I do have an email support ticket with Solana kind of addressing these specifications. And right now it's been almost a week and it's been unanswered right now. They told me it's delayed and they're waiting to get back to me. But yeah, here's the question so you can see, and I'll provide an update once I do get a full answer, because the questions I kind of asked them are like really basic and should have been obvious, in my opinion, on the product page and stuff like that. I hope you enjoyed my video, and watch out for my camera review of the Saga when that comes out shortly. So again, thank you for watching. Bye bye.